So if I asked you to talk us through this so-called peace deal from the get-go, would you be able to do it in the time available if I asked you to imagine you were addressing somebody who knew absolutely nothing about it?
I'll give it my best shot. How about that, James?
Take it away.
Well, basically, this was a deal that was cooked up by people very close to Trump. So a combination, it looks like his son-in-law, his business partner, Steve Witkoff, his vice president, J.D. Vance, who's very supportive and I think very important in this whole process. So three people who were very close to Trump in direct negotiations with the Russians put together what could only be called a Russian wish list. What do you want, Vladimir Putin, for you to have a deal? And I don't even like to use the phrase peace deal because I don't believe it is peace. But it basically is a Russian deal to be imposed on Ukraine by the U.S. government, worked out between senior Russians and people very close to Trump.
Hang on a minute. There's someone missing from that. I can't quite put my finger on who it might. Who might we have expected to be in attendance at this negotiation about what happens between Russia and Ukraine?
There was not a single Well, the U.S. government claims there was Ukrainian input. But they were not in the room when I think the key players sat down and agreed the position. And, the Ukrainians were blindsided by this deal when it came out because it's a truly terrible deal for them. It is not an even-handed deal. Ukraine gets nothing from what we can be. They get their sovereignty limited. They get no security guarantees of any value. Russia gets the land it conquered plus more. Russia, even crucially, I don't think people are talking about this enough, gets legal recognition of the land it seized. In other words, Europe that we know ends. The post-1945 Europe is over, and we are back now to conquest and the seizing of territory that legally gets transferred and the seizing of people. So millions of Ukrainians get transferred from a democracy to a dictatorship through this deal.
And this is...
Plus, by the way, the Russians get all amnesty.
So it is. Literally, what would you need for us to back a ceasefire? And this is what Russia has put together, in which the men that you mentioned at the outset have sort of greenlit and just ticked. We're in the bit now where Marco Rubio is saying that there was American involvement in the
of course
document. No, but then there's the bit that we'll move through quite quickly when he said there wasn't.
Yeah, well, basically, my own view on this, and of course this is speculation, is that what happened is this was Vance, who was Vance is very powerful in this. Vance and Rubio are fighting for the Republican nomination in 2028. So this was Rubio distancing himself from Vance's, what is seen as more as Vance's move, or trying to say it wasn't me. So this is a lot of that is internal politics, but then he got slapped down very hard.
Then he had to undistance himself from it.
Yeah, he got slapped down for that. I mean, and then he was forced to come out and say, yes, I was involved, and the Ukrainians were involved. But I think what that was is Republican politics. I mean, the idea that there's some desperate hope that Rubio will be pro-Ukrainian, as if Rubio will show backbone. The one thing we have seen from Rubio is that he will do what Trump wants. He was violently anti-Trump in 2016, said Trump would destroy the Republican Party, and now he is one of Trump's, most loyal servants. So the idea that Rubio is going to stand up and be helpful is, I think, reaching a bit. But I think what people missed is the domestic political
that's really interesting.
Imperatives that are going on here. They are the number 1 and 2 contenders for the nomination in 2028.
That's a touch of Occam's razor there, but you're right. A lot of people have missed it. What they haven't missed, and the reason I mentioned people who ring into the programme, as well as people kind enough to grace us with their expertise like you, was a Slovakian lady who talked to us at the very outset of this about the 1938 Munich deal, about the about us but without us paradigm that people in that part of the world are very, very familiar with. And that is exactly where we are again, isn't it?
Well, it's worse.
Go on.
It's worse. In Munich, actually, Chamberlain thought he was doing an honorable deal. I mean, it wasn't an honorable deal, but he thought he was doing a reasonable deal. Thought he was protecting the Czechs, thought he was really delaying war, thought he was doing the right thing. The Trump administration is trying to help Vladimir Putin. Chamberlain was not in his own mind helping Adolf Hitler.
Got it.
And so it's actually very different in how they approached it. The U.S. government is basically acting as a lobbying agency for the Russian government in this.
Which leads us to the question that we have addressed many times, and yet gets bigger every time we ask it. I mean, where is Ukraine if Donald Trump does sort of pull the plug completely, or does use this as some sort of excuse to do what Putin also wants him to do? The second best case scenario from Putin's point of view would be the American abandonment.
Well, it's a great question. I mean, one thing, by the way, the U.S. has almost already pulled the plug as well.
Yes, of course.
So we have to be, it's not like Trump has been aiding Ukraine with lots of support. He has given a tiny amount of, sold at a high markup, a very small amount of military equipment through Europe. I mean, it would be 1% of what the Biden administration sent. So he's not providing Ukraine with a great deal of aid as it is. I think if he pulled the plug, I mean, what he gave was not irrelevant, but it wasn't that important. This comes down, as it always has for the last year, to what Europe does. This is now Ukraine is a European problem. And it's a European issue that has to be settled. And so it will come down to what European states wish to do on their own behalf.
And what do you think that will be?
I don't know. I think they're torn.
Yeah.
I mean, I think there's some who would like to back Ukraine to the hilt. Usually those close to Russia, the Baltics, the Nordics, maybe Poland, Romania, they see this as existential. I think as you move farther away, there are those who would be more likely to force a deal on Ukraine that Ukraine doesn't want, but just to try and get a temporary respite from where things are. So,
final question. I mean, does it surprise you that much of the coverage still doesn't recognise what has been obvious for some time? That line. I mean, even Daniel Hannan now saying that Trump is acting exactly as a Kremlin agent would, or as a Russian patsy would, when it first appeared, possibly because it was in the shadow of the Israeli Gaza scenario, but it was talked about as if this was being proposed by rational, sensible, honest people across much of our media.
James, one thing that still confuses me is why people make excuses for Trump all the time.
Yeah.
We have had for years people, I mean, we just saw it in the last 2 months perfectly. Supposedly, Trump was going to do the right thing for Ukraine. He was active. He was positive. He was putting sanctions on Russia. So when he does things that people supposedly like, even when they're not existent, by the way, the oil sanctions we now know were a fraud because no secondary sanctions came on last week. Then he's positive. But then when he does something bad, it's not his responsibility. It was Witkoff freelancing. But we have built into our reporting a really worrying trend of trying to justify Trump, to present Trump in the best light. And my own view is we're going to make excuses for Trump until we have our own destruction. That we are just trying to say it's not so bad, he's not so bad. When something he does is terrible, he's not responsible. When something that he does that is good, which he really doesn't do, we praise him to the skies. But
It also struck me that I think it's just from to be generous, it's motivated partly by fear of reality, isn't it? It's like they don't really want to acknowledge that we've got somebody who, for whatever reason, is doing whatever Vladimir Putin wants him to do in the White House. Something that struck me on that very theme this weekend was time. So because we're addicted to the 24-hour news cycle, and Trump is very much a creation of the 24-hour news cycle, we lose sight of the fact that if you were Vladimir Putin, you don't really care about the 24-hour news cycle. You know you're going to get what you want eventually, and you don't care about how many Russians die. You certainly don't care about how many Ukrainians die. Donald Trump is going to do what you want if you're Vladimir Putin. And you don't really matter. It doesn't matter to you whether it happens tomorrow or next year. And that's our problem with news coverage here, is that we're addicted to the 24-hour cycle. And you can't print the same story every day, which is, this doesn't matter, this doesn't matter, this doesn't matter. Eventually, Trump will do whatever Putin wants. But you know that, and I know that, and everybody paying attention knows that.
For the past 5 months, we've had a pantomime.
Yeah.
go on, where nothing changed. Basically, Trump was protecting Putin and letting Putin get along with his war. That's what Trump's been doing. But we had all this, is he changing? Is he not changing? Is he backing Ukraine? Is he backing Russia? But it was all just the same. It was simply giving Putin time to do. There were no real sanctions on Russia. All that just never happened. That there's been protection, but people don't want to face the big story of what is going on here because maybe for reasons of drama, as you said, of time, of interest, we must pretend that there is something that might happen that it isn't going to happen to present drama, but it's just crazy.